Hi, my name's Ash from Crack Minis, and today I'm going to be having a blast doing some terrain. Also, I'm going to have a crack at a bit of graffiti. See how we get on. Enjoy. Alright, so originally this was going to be a hangar for like planes or something. And yeah, I had this toy school bus, and I thought, oh, I'll use that for the roof and build the rest of the terrain around it. And then obviously I've changed my mind halfway through as well what it's going to be, and made it into a radio station instead. So yeah, that's why there's a school bus there, because I'm going to use that to cheat. And by cheat I mean I'm going to use it as half the building, so I don't have to make those shapes myself. I've got to say, this thing was pretty well put together. I had an absolute nightmare ripping it apart, but I got there in the end, and with the power of editing, I'm going to make it look like I did it without even trying. Okay, so that's it separated. I only really need the yellow bit. The grey bit is going to go into one of my boxes, and I'll probably use it in a future build. I have had an idea for the vehicle, and this would save me a lot of time if I use this and then build on top of it. So yeah, it'll definitely be reappearing, but I don't know when. Okay, so now the roof's sorted, it's time to start the walls. And for that, I'm going to use some foam core. I don't really need to explain what foam core is, do I? Nah, I'll just leave it. You can guess. For this, I actually pulled out a ruler. I don't normally use the ruler other than for a straight edge, but I thought I might as well try and get some measurements in and show you how I work things out when it comes to doing bits of terrain with foam core. When I'm scratch building terrain and it has multiple stories, I usually tend to stick with around about 5 centimeters per story. So that's what I did with this. I marked off 5 centimeters, did a straight line, cut that straight line, and that was what I was going to be using for the first floor. And if you see what I did there, I missed a bit, and that's fine. It wasn't perfectly straight, because I've got a knife and I can just shave it down. So it's better to be a bit over than it is to be a bit under. That goes doubly for when the thing that you're trying to surround is not straight in any sense of the word. Because it's a kid's toy, it's like very curved, no sharp edges, which makes getting stuff to fit around it quite difficult. So you should always leave yourself a little bit extra length when especially when you're doing something like this. So that's why I switched from the ruler to just scoring off where I thought the best place to cut would be. What I'm doing on screen now is I'm doing some light measurements, just trying to work out how I want the taper to look, because I wanted it to come outwards towards the bottom, just to break up the shape, and because I didn't really want to rely on the straight lines, because I'm not very good at straight lines. So I thought having that angle would help me hide any imperfections that I knew were going to be in it, because there's always imperfections when you scratch building. It reminds me of when I was younger and I used to work construction, and my boss said to me, he goes, the only thing a customer cares about is the last 10% of the job. You could be the best builder in all the world, and if you leave it looking ugly at the end, that's what people care about. So you do the best you can, and you just try and make it look as tidy as you can at the end. I forgot to adjust the length of the thing enough that I could follow the same measurement on both sides without account, but I didn't account for that. I literally did it flat perfect so that it slid right in, and then the piece I had for the other end just wouldn't clap on. So I had to recut that, but I saved that other bit for the front later on where the doorway goes in. This is why I'm telling you, always leave more than what you need, or you're going to make mistakes like I do. Once I fixed that, I glued the sides on. I used clamps because it wouldn't stay together while it was drying. And then I got started on the base. And for the base, I used one of those cork bottom placemats and just cut it right down the middle, and it was perfect. And I got an extra one obviously now, so I can do something on that as well. I trimmed all the corners just so it looked a bit tidier, and I give it a good sanding. Basically I just wanted to rough up the surface so that I could stick stuff to it easier. Also, I didn't want it peeling, and I figured if I broke the surface it wouldn't peel as much. which it hasn't so far. I'll let you know in 6 months. I got that excited once I got the base finished. I glued the model down, and then after I let it sit there drying for a little bit, I realised I hadn't filled the windows in. So I had to pop it back off and put on some windows. I kept what I used for the windows pretty simple. I just cut out some strips of plastic card, put them inside with a bit of super glue, and yeah, that was basically it. The windows were sorted and I could glue it back down onto the base. That's when I took my mistake from earlier. The first one, not the second one, obviously. That extra offcut that I had. Cut a hole in it and stuck on the front. That's going to be the doorway. I'm going to sort the doors out now. For those, I used pieces of an old chopping board that I sanded flat. No cut to size. Sanded flat to fit. I wanted to fit in before I put the terrain paste on, because I had a feeling that if I had done it afterwards, I wouldn't be able to fit them in, which is probably true. So I pulled out my rotary tool and I went to work trying to make them look like basically they'd been cut out of a big massive plate and just hinges were stuck on, and that was it. It was your doorway. Don't forget to wear a mask if you're going to be doing this at home, because it's important, especially with the dust particles. You don't want to make yourself ill. And that took way too long. So what I did was I got my trusty file out and I started doing it with that, and it worked so much better. So much better. And once those were in and ready to go, I got out my trusty terrain paste. Now, my trusty terrain paste is made from all-purpose filler, some Mod Podge to thin it out, and a load of black paint. That's it. The only reason there's Mod Podge in it was because it was starting to dry out. So normally it'd just be filler and black paint. I'd suggest doing that. That basically helps you see if there's any bits you've missed once it dries. And what I did was I just plastered it on. I say plastered. I put a thin layer on all the way around it. It technically is plastering. It's just a thin version of it. Just so all the way around. Try to keep the lines to a minimum. Dabbing it on when I can. I used a dry brush for it. You can just use a makeup brush or whatever. But I find that the circular shape and the amount of bristles in there really does just help get it on there, and it keeps that texture from looking like it's streaky, which is not what I wanted. Once that's all done, you end up with something that looks like this, and then it's time for me to open up one of my Doom boxes and get some bits out. Don't judge me for it being a quality street tin. Any box can be a Doom box if you don't organise enough. I'm going to give you an abridged version of this just because I don't want to watch myself and talk about all the random little bits that I pulled out of this tub to stick on here when you're going to see me stick them on in a minute. So I'm just going to speed through this, and I found some bits. That's basically it. Alright, so I decided that I wanted to build my radio tower on the bonnet of the school bus. So I wanted the tower on the bonnet, and to go around the bonnet I'd wanted like these guardrails to stop people from climbing up on top of it. And I decided to use some Connects for that. I think I got these from a Connects roller coaster. Same with the thin plastic bits that I'm going to use as the guardrails. They were actually rails on the roller coaster. Putting this together was pretty easy. I literally just used the cornery bits, stuck on the thin strippy bits, just jammed it all together. And then there you go. Guardrails. And I made 3 of them and glued them into place. I decided to put some basic defences on the building. And to do that I used a Star Wars blaster cannon thing off the Star Wars ship that I used to make my first spaceship. You know, the one where I combined a Star Wars Battlefront model, the White Tiger Zord, and a tank from Meng into one to make it like a troop transport. Well, I used that. And to hold it in place, I used another piece off another tank that you move the gun up and down, just to make it look like it could move. It doesn't move, I just glued it solid, but you know what I mean? Now it's time for the hardest part of the build. I'm going to make a radio tower. Now to do this I'm going to be using wire, lollipop sticks, and some other random rubbish that I can string on. So let's go. First thing I did was I drilled 4 holes in the bonnet of the bus. Second thing I did was I got up my wire. I cut it to a decent sized length, then put the lollipop stick over the top of it. Getting these right took me about 4 or 5 different attempts. I knew I wanted a piece in the middle to separate them, so basically I wanted it to come up pretty much straight up to about halfway, and then start again and come into itself into like a cone shape at the top. It was a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. I kept getting the length of the wire wrong, because I had no way of stopping it from hitting the bottom, and it kept bending when it was hitting the bottom inside. So yeah, once I'd got the 4 main legs in place, I took what was an old fence gate from another model kit, like just fences. It was just a gate for that, and I drilled 4 little holes into it to push into the wire so that it'd come through, and that was be like a platform in the middle for like inspections and things like that. Getting it to sit level was a challenge, just because the bonnet swoops down, and then trying to get it to counteract so it looked right. It was just weird. I don't know what I'm doing with my hands right now. I'm making symbols with my hands. You can't see them, so it's fine. And I really struggled with it, so I ended up having to redo it basically. Put longer lengths of wire in and change how the pipes looked. Cut some chunks out, stick them in just to make sure it was level. Put like a piece on 1 centimetre at a time or 1/2 centimetre at a time just to get that platform flat. And then I could build up from there. And I ended up with this. It looked pretty precarious, and like a strong wind would knock it over, so I decided to bulk it up by jamming on bits of wood and plastic just to fill out the whole space, so it still looked like a radio tower, but it looked like one that had been fixed over and over and over again until you end up with what you've got, which is just a tower made of bits of junk strapped to other bits of junk. And now it's time to make it look like an actual radio tower, which needs antennae, sort of, and dishes. So, first off, I got myself a little piece of plastic, and I glued some bits onto there. These are made from the wheel parts of scale tanks. And I used a guitar wire to make it all look like it's connected into a building. This basically just made the plates shoot off, and I had to rearrange everything, and then in doing that I decided I'll do that in another bit, and this time I'm going to switch over to sticking some pipes into the side of the building. I didn't know why I wanted pipes in the building, it just looked like it was a bit barren on one side and it needed some, like an interest piece. And that's what the tower looked like. I don't know why I did the jump cut. Obviously didn't film me putting all this stuff on there, which I'm not impressed about, unless I come across it later on in the video, which way I will talk about it. But that's a piece of artillery with shield stuck on it, by the way. And I think that's a piece of a Tau shield drone, I think. Anyway, I wrapped the whole thing in chain, and then I used bits of wire bent to attach that to the roof to make it look like it was, stop it from shaking or whatever. And now it's back to the pipes. I was all over the place with this filming. Seems like I'm trying to keep track of what I filmed and in what order. I could just rearrange everything, but then I have to do all the audio again, so no, I'm not going to. Anyway, I drilled a hole in it, and I stuck a steering wheel from, I think it was like a Tamiya model in there to make it look like a handle to control the flow of whatever's in there. And this is the bit where I start sticking ancillary junk everywhere. So, just busy up the model around the base a little bit. So, I didn't really want to go too fancy with this, so I concentrated on putting extra stuff where extra stuff needed to be and only where it needed to be. I know sometimes more is more and less is less, but, well, they say less is more is more is less. I don't know the saying. All I know is I didn't want it to look too busy, because a lot of my other models do tend to look quite busy, and I wanted to simplify and let the paint job speak for itself on this one. And that basically brings us up to the sign. I did stick a couple more things on off camera, but you'll see them as I go, so they're not super important. Anyway, for the sign, I decided to call this place the WAJO. Now, the reason I decided to call it the WAJO is to do with the story of the guy who runs the place. His name's Slick. He's a shock jock, cyborg. Basically, he's got a speech impediment, so he can't say radio, he says WAJO. And when he first started doing what he does, people mocked him, and he sort of just leaned into it really heavily. And he's been doing this thing for, like, what, 100 years? Because he's a cyborg, he basically doesn't age. It's just the flesh bits become less fleshy, and the robot bits become more robot-y. But yeah, so over time it's literally just been like devolved from being the radio station to the WAJO station to the WAJO, and that's what it's called, the WAJO. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I don't know how long this episode's going to be, so just keep watching. Yeah, I never know how long my episodes are going to be. Especially now, because I've started editing as I talk, so I can leave more bits in, take more bits out. Also seems to shorten the process as well, which really helps. What I'm doing now is I'm basically just going back over with my terrain paste and filling in any gaps so that you don't notice that they're there. And it makes them look seamless and connecting to the ground. Well, not seamless, obviously, because you want to see them. You want to look from dirt to flat surface, but you get what I'm saying. Filling in gaps. Now I'm doing something that I forgot to do before, which is putting hinges on the door, because that's important. It's a big old chunky door, so it needs big old chunky hinges. And now it's time for rivets. I literally just went in a big long row all the way around the top of the roof, just at the ridge line for the rivets. I didn't want to do too much because I had no idea how I was going to paint this before I'd even got to this stage. And the rivets, although I wanted some, I didn't need them. They're just there because they make it look a little bit better, and that's it. And it's ready for painting. I'm pretty happy with the way it looks now, but yeah, it's time to paint. I started off by giving the whole thing a nice black prime. Nothing fancy, we're not doing Zenithal highlight, I ain't showing off. Also, I'm going to be painting on this so heavily that it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to be using some cheap paints to start, because I decided, why not have a go? I used to just use cheap acrylic paint to paint all my models, my terrain models anyway. So I was thinking, let's go back more to that vein and do some of the things that I used to do. So the first thing I did was I mixed up a grey, and I started painting that where it's all concrete-y. And then I moved on to the metallics. And for the metallics, I started off with brown. Now, I didn't actually have a brown to hand. I found it later on. But by that time, I'd already painted it, so there's no point in worrying about that. And I made it using just some blue, yellow, and red, because that's all you need for brown. And then just changing the quantities of different colours to get different shades. And yeah, that's how I did my rusty brown paint. I started off by brushing it on, and it just wasn't going on thick enough, so I got myself a big heavy brush and I dabbed it on over and over again. This also gave me this really nice like pitted texture throughout the whole thing. I was actually really chuffed with how well it came out, considering how cheap the paint was and how thin the paint was and how many layers it took me to do. So it was like 6 or 7 layers of paint and different colours just to get it the way I wanted it to look. I didn't really get an ugly phase in this. Normally when I'm painting I hit an ugly patch when I'm just not happy with how it looks, which I didn't really get with this. I was quite surprised by that as well, because normally I hate the ugly phase. I just didn't get that. It's weird. I did have a problem though, because the cheap paints take longer to dry. I had to wait overnight for it to set. And like I said, I come back to it and it still looked just as good as it did before. A little bit darker than it was. And I got to work on it with silver. Normally, what I do is I paint it black and then I just smash on the silver with a sponge. So this time I did the reverse, where I put the rusty paint on, then I did the silver paint. I actually prefer it this way, and I'm going to start doing it this way from now on. Paint it brown and then add the silver on after the fact. Because then you're only really getting the silver on the bits that would be silver, shiny, metallic. I tried to look at where the light was hitting the model and concentrate on just putting the metallic paints where the light was hitting and keep it away from where the shadows were. I think that helped a lot with stopping me from going overboard, because I tend to just throw on the silvers and the metallics and all that stuff, just throw it on there and hope for the best. This time I went slow and tried to be a bit more methodical with it, and it really helped towards the end with how well it looked with those metallic paints. And then it was time to add some colour. Now, I wanted to go as sparingly as I could with the colour. I wanted this thing to look so weather beaten and worn. Just I wanted you to be able to tell what it was supposed to look like, but obviously see more how it looks now. And I kept the really basic colour scheme. I used to white, red, blue, yellow and green. That's it. And to start off with, I went along this big strip, goes all the way around the model, and I painted that blue. And I left as much of the metallic and the rust showing as I could. After doing a couple little bits on the bottom blue as well, I moved on to the roof, which I'm a little bit gutted I did. I feel like I should have left it as it was, because it looked really good, and I was really happy with how it came out. I could have just stuck a wash on it, but I decided I wanted it to be green, and I'll probably regret that forever, but still, I've done it now, can't go back on myself, and it does look alright. And I put a yellow on the window panels. I'll call it the window panels just because that's where the windows are. It's like, I was quite lucky with the toy because it had these nice big bold separations, and it let me keep like as much of the metallics as I could on there, and kept the lines separate, so it was really easy to paint the sections, and I was really happy about that. After those bits were done, I went back to the concrete walls. The reason I went back to the concrete walls is because we were going to dry brush them. The reason I dry brushed them is because when I was going to put the wash on, I didn't want it to go too dark. So I thought if I bring it up a couple shades, I get a better contrast from the wash, and it also helped me with the surface looking a bit better for when I come to doing graffiti on it. Because I wanted to try and include graffiti on this build. I feel like my builds are a bit boring, especially with the, like, they don't really feel lived in. And I was watching this thing, and it says best way for your models to look like they feel like they're from an actual world is to include graffiti and little things like that, stuff that you'd see on the side of industrial buildings, like randomly in cities and things like that. They're good to add on to your models to give them more life. Posters is another one that I'm working on. If I do come up with some poster ideas, I'm probably going to put them all onto like a sheet, just get set to scale for printing on an A4. I tried doing hazard straps on this one as well, in a few different places. This is just on the door itself. There's a couple on the tower. I feel like I'm taking 2 steps forwards, 1 step back with this. So every time I feel like I'm getting there, it seems to just go, no, you messed it up. I'm just going to keep trying until I get it. And once it clicks, it clicks. The last bit of painting I did was, for the main painting, was I went over everything with a little bit of red, just in here and there, sides, barrels, stuff like that. Any bits that I hadn't painted that I wanted to be sheet metal and stuff like that, so that was all red. And now it's time for the graffiti, which I was pretty happy, like I was excited to do this. I'd never done this before. So first thing I thought was I'll be clever and I'll try my airbrush. And I made a bit of a mistake with that. I run before I could walk. It did help me work out how big I wanted it to be and where I wanted the lettering, and it also gave a nice edge to the base coat. So what I did was I painted a big patch black, then I painted red over the top, and then I added the lettering underneath that, and this really, it helped the edges be undefined. So like, when you spray paint something, you have that like splatter that goes around the edges. This really helped with that, but not much else. Maybe one day I'll be able to do it with the airbrush, but I don't think I have the skill. Just don't have the skill with one to do it. Also, I think I destroyed my airbrush after this video, because I've just realised I forgot to clean it properly, so that's going to be fun. Yay. After failing miserably with the airbrush, I sat on it for a little bit. Just not the airbrush, I mean I decided to leave the model sit there for about half hour, 45 minutes, while the paint got touch dry. I had to think about how I wanted it to look, and I pulled out my trusty paintbrushes, and I started to find out the shape. I used the same colours I used in the airbrush, I just used them on a brush, and I started with the white just to fill in any gaps so that it didn't look patchy, because that was something I was worried about. And then I got out a red. I used the red around the letters, this brought them to life. So I had the black, red, then white, but I had to paint them in reverse order because I'd messed up with the airbrush so much. So I used the red to bring out those letters. One side reads Wasteland Forever, misspelled, and the other one is WAJO 414. And I'm pretty happy with how they looked. After I did the red, I went around it again with the white. This was just to bring more life to the centre of those those spaces, those letters. It's hard talking about graffiti because I don't really know what to say, because I'm not really a graffiti artist, so I don't know how to describe things. I don't even know what style this is. I went for something similar to wild style, but it ended up looking more block lettery, which I'm not like bothered that I don't know what style it is. I mean, it's all part of learning, isn't it? Especially when you're doing something new that you've not really tried before. Yeah, just trying to bring the thing to life in the right way. Alright, so once I'd done that, and I got the letters the way I wanted them to look, I threw on a wash. Just a nice basic acrylic wash. Acrylic ink, bit of black paint, bit of brown paint, and a bit of matte medium. So that's it. And then obviously I waited for it to dry a little bit, then dabbed most of it off. And then I started highlighting. I'm just going to do that off camera and let you enjoy the spinny bit. I just want you to see what it looks like finished. I'm really impressed with myself on this one. I don't normally toot my own horn this much. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you feel like you've learned anything, let me know. If you want to tell me stuff or show me stuff that you think I might be able to learn from, also leave a comment. I'll check it out. Okay, thanks. Enjoy the spinny bit.